When the railroad construction began, people in Greensburg were a bit frightened about it all because they had heard stories about places west, up around Blairsville and toward Johnstown. There was a lot of rioting going on. The guys building the railroad were not always peaceful. And we would think it was because of wages, and they certainly weren't getting much, but most of the rioting and fighting that was going on had to do with quarrels that these guys brought with them from Ireland. They were mostly Irish, and they had traditions of enmity from ages past with the people from the north and south of Ireland. We might mention the Corkmen and the Fardowners. This is Frank Cowan, one of the most interesting people the city of Greensburg has produced. He wrote of the conflicts between these bands of Irishmen building the railroad. And these were not little pretty events. I mean, one Sunday afternoon in 1852 in June, these guys gave us a good demonstration of what a real weekend warrior was all about. The people killed and injured. That's where Frank Cowan grew up. His father lived there. His father was a United States senator and a lawyer. Frank was himself a physician, a lawyer, a world traveler, a writer, a newspaper editor, and also a benefactor of the city of Greensburg. And that very place was where he began Greensburg's first hospital. This is an event that he wrote about. We may call it the Battle of Derry, but actually Derry wasn't even there yet. We abused chronology to speak that way. But there were about 500 Irishmen coming from different parts of Ireland who hated one another. And the contractors tried to keep them apart, but eventually these two parts of the railroad were getting closer and closer together. And when they got close enough together, there was no one that could keep these guys apart because they wanted to kill one another. And they tried to. And some people got killed, some got injured, and many lived to tell the story. And it's a story that Frank Cowan tells in one of his books. And I might mention it wasn't only the workmen that were fighting during the progress of this job. This shows a scene that happened in Greensburg when Charles Jeffries, an engineer who was working for the railroad, was attacked by Richard McGran, a contractor. The contractors were not railroad employees, whereas the engineers were. So the engineers were trying to make sure that the work was done up to snuff, that all the track levels would be exact and perfect. But the engineers were, of course, trying to get the job done and over with. And so one evening after work, after the two of these fellows had had a horrible argument during the day, McGran showed up with a whip in his hand and beat the crap out of Jeffries, who went to court. And that's the only way we would know about this, from court trial records. And this, I might mention, is one of the reasons why people in Greensburg did not like rainy days while the railroad was being built. We might say that the fellows didn't exactly have exotic living conditions to stay in, so when it rained, it was not very pleasant for them to stay home. They came into town and hung out at the local watering places, and this is often what happened. Very unpleasant circumstances. People got injured, beat up, a couple killed, and pretty much turned the town into a rather riotous, disturbed affair for the time the railroad was being built. This was the courthouse during the period of railroad building. And it was actually the building of the railroad that prompted the building of a new courthouse, because there was so many court cases that came up, not only for the rioting and the vicious, cruel things that happened, but also for land transactions. And the present courthouse simply could not deal with the amount of work that they were bludgeoned or overblown with. And in 1854, a new courthouse was built, the third one. This is the second courthouse. This is what looking like, this is what building a railroad looked like. It was handwork back at that time. There were no bulldozers, none of the heavy equipment we're familiar with. It was a lot of Irishmen with their donkey carts, horse carts, wheelbarrows, and whatever they could get to move earth. We stop here for a minute.